Good evening, and welcome to the Academy Brain Trust. The Academy Brain Trust is a roundtable discussion forum here on the Academy channel, determining solutions for societal problems. Tonight's pilot episode is on the subject of prison reform. How do we make prisons more effective, efficient, productive, and correctional? Are prisons purely punitive, or can they be centers for rehabilitation? And perhaps most of all, should the prison system be privatized? And if so, should it be regulated? And if so, how? All this and more we will ponder, discuss, delineate over the next hour or so here on the Academy. Joining me for this discussion tonight so far are Dead Kyle and Eglord the Nosferatu. Welcome.
Hello.
So, as of right now, we constitute the Brain Trust. What do you guys have to say about the state of the current prison system that you think are the biggest issues with it?
Considering we are we have the United States supposedly being the most free and open nation on the planet, has the largest prison population on the planet, consisting of around 1 to 1.8% of the American public and the American, citizens being in prison. That's the biggest problem.
Is that more of a problem with the judicial system and policing, or the prison system in general, or perhaps culture?
It's probably like a huge shitstorm, like a perfect storm shitstorm of all of those things.
Yeah,
The prison system being privatized, paying politicians off to make sure that laws are passed that put more people in prison, which makes more money for them. Public defenders in cities and towns not having enough, office space,
Resources.
not enough people wanting, resources, not having enough students that want to go into public defense, that's a huge problem. And people just not being educated on their rights too. That's a huge problem.
But
among so many others.
This discussion is about prison reform. So how do we first of all lower the populations? Is there an argument for reducing time for nonviolent offenders?
Oh yeah.
Under what conditions would you think that would be a good idea?
If they're a first or second time offender and they have not committed any violent crimes in their past, and it's a low level drug offenses, like if you have a little bit of cocaine or if you have had some pot, no matter, I don't think, even if you had 50 pounds or 100 pounds of pot in your closet or something, I still don't, that's a long time to be sent away for, for just something that's not going to hurt anybody else but you.
I don't know. I think 100 pounds, it's like a lifetime supply for like.
Oh yeah.
For like a group of people.
A group of old aging hippies.
Yeah. So, first of all, nonviolent offenses and the law's issues definitely on the books. But other than prison population and the percentage of Americans that are in the prison system, we're looking for viable solutions specifically within the prison system. And so let me present one of the issues that I have. One of the major concerns that I have with prisons is that people go into prisons and they come out better, more efficient criminals. And that's not an effective or a good prison system, in my opinion. I consider the prison system to be, currently in the United States, the state of it is it's more of a punitive system than it is a corrective system or a rehabilitative system. If you're going to lock up, look, there are certain drug charges that people need to be locked away for.
Yeah.
Honestly, as much of a libertarian and advocate for legalization of many drugs as I am, there are certain things that you got to be there's got to be a line.
People that sell large amounts of heroin definitely need to be put in jail. And methamphetamine and crack cocaine, those major, harmful, horrible, life-ruining drugs.
Yeah, I have serious issue with these. And so I feel like there needs to be, but I also consider these people that are hooked on these drugs to be, they're victims. They're not so
Yeah,
much victims, but they have a problem.
yeah,
They're sick and they need help as much as they need corrective. And it doesn't need to be punitive. It doesn't need to be vindictive. It can
yeah.
be corrective,
But you,
rehabilitative.
but you do know why a lot of people use. Oh, sorry, I kind of came in. You know why a lot of people use drugs, right?
To cope with depression, anxiety,
Yeah, it's
mental
it's
Self-medication,
disorders,
it's
yeah.
self-medication.
self-medicating. So
Yeah.
a lot of these people have it's something we actually learn about in toxicology. So it's just like a lot of these people have significant issues that for one way or another they couldn't deal with correctly. So they really are in a sense victims.
Yeah.
They have to be treated really like you have to be kind of tough love to them to an extent, but they are victims in a way.
Yeah.
So, prison rehabilitation for drug offenses specifically, do you feel like we can incorporate some counseling and so forth like that for actual rehabilitation? This is something that I don't feel exists enough in the prison systems.
No, it doesn't.
No,
I
yeah.
would
Yeah, that's
personally
why.
I
That's
would
actually.
I would personally love to see um, people with drug offense, people who are using drugs and they're arrested for that, not people selling. I would love for them to be sent not necessarily to a prison, but like a rehab facility that actually deals with the psychological and physical aspects of addiction. But they can't leave, so it's kind of like prison in that sense. Does that make sense?
Actually, you know what?
Yes.
You've just given me a concept, and this is why we call this show the Brain Trust. How do you guys feel about the concept of a multi-tiered prison system? I know we have like federal max and state and local jails, but
But something more specific is
yeah,
what you
something more
what you want.
specific, like what Tina's talking about, where you have nonviolent drug offenses for addicts, and it's not rehab. It's not rehab. It is prison. You are going to jail. You will have a routine, but it's actually more along the lines of rehab than anything else.
Oh
Well,
yeah.
that's kind of an issue of our current system as well. The
Mm.
majority of reformation within prison walls is of a religious nature.
Yes, it is like, find
it tends-
Jesus
Yeah, it
instead of
tends to
actually find
be-
solutions.
Well,
it
that's
tends-
because the only
people tend to be indoctrinated into cults while they're in prison.
Well, that's because the only people trying to go and reform prisons right now are charitable organizations attached to organized religion.
Mhm.
They're the only systems large enough that actually have the money and the resources to send people into prisons and try to gain followers through large scale reform.
And
Yeah.
I'm not saying that the religious aspect entirely is an issue, but we kind of need an alternative, a more secular alternative.
I
think.
definitely agree.
Yeah.
I definitely agree. We need a more psychology, more sociology driven alternative to reforming people. But I also had another concept, and let's get off the drugs for just a second. And
Yeah.
perhaps some drug offenders can be involved in this, but let's talk about low level things like B&E, petty theft, things that
Yeah.
send people away for 5 to 10 years.
Like petty theft, like shoplifting and stuff like that, where like
Yes.
the judge will throw the book at someone for stealing a pack of M&Ms or something, and he'll go to jail for 8 years or something.
Yeah, because it's his fourth offense, and the
Yeah.
judge is like, "You're just not getting it, so you get 8 years." I'm just like, "Oh,
Yeah.
fuck." Yeah." So, um, these offenses, I believe at this point we should redirect these people's attention. I feel like skills trade training would come in very useful here.
Well, I mean, and that's okay. So when we're talking about the concept of prisons, at least from what they're supposed to be, for me, they are supposed to be, for the most part, places where you rehabilitate people to go function in society as functional people, and also where you hold the really dangerous ones who can never be rehabilitated.
Okay, so that's the top tier
Yeah.
of prisons where these people, what we're going to do with them, of course, we have this one section where we just block them off in concrete and put a window and a little slab.
Like federal maximum security.
Yeah.
These people don't ever need to see another human being ever again. I don't agree in solitary though. Solitary is a bad thing that fucks people to death mentally.
Well, there are certain, I'm thinking the Hannibal Lecters of the world.
Yeah, people that are so
Yeah,
bad that if they're in a room with somebody, they'll eat your eyeball.
I'm not that much of a bleeding heart. I'm not someone who thinks everyone can be rehabilitated. I think most people can. But
Oh, yeah.
I think there's a very small minority where it's just like we have to lock these people away and they just have to be there.
Yeah, I'm thinking there's a point where you have a smaller group that you just study.
Yeah.
And they provide great use for society once they're caught and captured and stuck in a little block with a window to look at and observe. And then outside of that, we have these people that can't be rehabilitated, that aren't, like that level, but they're not going to be rehabilitated. There's no fixing them. So
Like
yeah,
Jeffrey Dahmer types.
yeah, and I believe that they kind of work in the prison system that exists right now. So that prison system as it exists can be scaled down quite a bit, and those people can be segregated into those prisons. The people that are the just absolute we've evaluated them. There's no releasing these people into society. They've got a life sentence. They're we can't fix them.
Yeah.
But then we have people that are getting out in 5 to 10 years. We need to give these people trade skills. Things that they, teach them how to be an AC repair guy and have them work on prison system ACs. Put them through electrical training. Put them through some small basic task where they can go into society and have a future. And make that their entire prison reform. And incentivize them by offering them 20% off their time if they complete all the courses and stay in the program the whole time they're in prison. That'll lower your prison population issue in the long run.
Well, and you also have to change some aspects of society too, because I do understand that there are some jobs that a felon just can never work at. Like they can never do the jobs because I work in forensics. If you're a felon, you can't do it. That's just how it is. But like, I don't understand why someone with a felony, when they've served their time, especially if it's one of the non-violent ones, like a drug felony, I don't understand why they can't like get a job somewhere else.
Yeah, they paid their debt to society, so why not?
Yeah, there definitely needs to be reform on the outgoing but I think that one of the major reasons that the culture is not ready to do that is because the prisons haven't reformed. They're not releasing better people than they're taking in.
Yeah.
And that's a major issue. And until you solve that problem, you can't convince the society to say, okay, yeah, we'll just open these people with welcome arms. When you start releasing people who have only a 10% recidivism rate, then you actually succeeded. And you're doing something right. And then society go, okay, yeah, we're more welcome to these guys. They don't have to get a job at McDonald's. They can get that $20 an hour job laying brick. Or
prisons now are like horrible boarding schools for people to learn how to become worse people. At this point, that basically, like people that are like go in there for small, like minor offenses, are taught and influenced by worse criminals that they're like put in the cells with, and they end up when they leave, they end up in. It's almost like a school. It's like a school for scoundrels kind of thing. They go in, they were innocent. They fucked up. Maybe they were young. They go in, they talk to somebody. This guy teaches them all these things like, oh yeah, I used to make $80,000 every 4 months doing this or something. And this is how you do it, and blah blah blah. And then when the person gets out, they know more and they're worse off than they were if they were treated a different way and put in a different population group in prison.
To an extent, that's kind of true. But the other thing is that they'll learn those skills. A lot of the people who come out of prison are genuinely good people. So even though they learn that stuff, they're like, nah, I want to go out and I want to be straight. I don't want to come back in here again. So they try to live life on the straight and narrow, and they can't get a job or whatever. Yeah, it gets frustrating real quick. And some of them have families and shit like that. A lot of them have to pay fines. So they get desperate and they're like, well, that guy taught me how to make money in prison. So, and then they go back. It's like this weird, vicious cycle.
Yeah, that whole other subject about how court fines and all these other court fees and stuff just debilitate people that are already, in the below the poverty line, and they can't pay these things. So they are almost forced by the state to go back into nefarious jobs.
Mm-hmm. Because I mean, like I've never been to prison. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing what I do. And I don't have a lot of people who've been to prison in my family, but I live in a town that is surrounded by prison. So a lot of the people who live here are ex-prisoners, strangely enough.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
And a lot of the, I've never met one who's terrible, because a lot of the terrible ones keep getting locked up, so I never meet them. But I have met ones that are just struggling. And you've got these people, they made a mistake back in the day. They've got kids now, they've got families, and then they'll be working at this job for 3 to 5 years, and somebody finds out what they did, and the manager will just fire them. And it's just it's kind of fucked up.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate, but once again, you really can't change society until you change the average prisoner coming out of prison. And I think that, and the best way to do that is to redirect them.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I agree with that.
Yeah. And I think the best redirection is you look at the skills gap in America and you see where the easiest jobs that an outcoming prisoner can get: construction, carpentry, electrical.
And they need to analyze what they're good at while they're in jail.
You can, and I think jails should if you don't have basic reading and math skills, that should be the first requirement. You can't go into any job training until you can pass a basic reading and math assessment.
Exactly.
And I honestly think that prisons should be run more like military boot school or boot camp or school, like military
building
school.
Skills instead of basically just holding you and
where everybody has a routine, you do things as a group, you rely on each other as a group, and then you go into testing, and then you're regrouped so that you're with people that are studying the same things as you, and it stays on that military. I honestly think that, and it's crazy for me as a libertarian to think like this, but I think that the military should run the prison system.
The military prison system, they're actually a lot better.
Well, I at least think I think if you're going to run private prison systems and you want to have the best one, you should probably hire some retired military guys.
But when a prison is for profit, they cut corners, they do some really terrible things.
Yeah, and that's where you get into in our introduction, one of the major questions is, should prisons be privatized? And if so, should they be regulated? And if so, how? So let's jump into that, since we're kind of falling into that. Let's get a round table. What does everybody think here? Tina?
If you're going to privatize, you need to regulate it like you would regulate any other business. Okay, so
any other business?
Here's an example.
Like they regulate the banks now.
Well, here's an example. There are private forensics labs. They still have to go through OSHA standards. They still have to live up to the standards set for forensics public labs. I mean, stuff like that. So I feel like you need to have some standards. You can't just be like, oh, it's a private prison, we're allowed to cut corners. Well, no, you have to have these standards.
Yeah, I agree. I'm in engineering, and we operate on ANSI and ASME, and there is there are entire libraries of books like, this is done exactly this way, period.
Yeah, it's like if you're in a chemistry lab and they don't have fume hoods because you're a private company, and you're like, well, we didn't want fume hoods. OSHA's going to be like, no, you need fume hoods.
Yeah. Well, that's an OSHA regulation. That's a health and safety. That's when you're talking about industry standards, it's a little different than OSHA.
Yeah. Oh no, that's just my example. We regulate private labs, and they're allowed to do, you can have a private lab work on a public case forensics. It's fine, but they have to be run by the same standards.
An industry standards, I guess, in a private lab, and I don't know because I'm not biological, but I'm gonna guess is there is a standard size for a flask. There is a standard size. There are standard sizes for flasks. They're not all over the place. There's this size, this size, this size, and that size. And so forth and so on.
So that exists, but I think more in forensics, our industry standards are what would you consider a positive result, or what would you consider a reportable result? Stuff like that.
Yeah, things like percentage of
Exactly.
like for example, on a DNA match, what's a positive DNA match?
Well, we're actually not allowed to say positives, believe it or not. Like we're not supposed to.
Yeah,
There's no
it's
rule
supposed to be
against
like,
it.
oh, it's as close as it can be.
98.4%. Yeah, okay.
No,
all right. So we're kind of getting.
It's more like you have to say it like, well, there is a 1, and it's usually a giant ass number, like 50 quadrillion or something like that, chance that this is the same profile. You can't say the word match, but I'm a toxicologist, so like here's an industry standard for us. If you're gonna validate a method, it has to be, and you do runs for the same drug. Every run has to be within plus or minus 20% accuracy for the concentration you're looking at. If your method is not maintaining that accuracy, then you can't validate it, and therefore you can't use it in forensic casework. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I bet you're seeing a lot of opium deaths.
Anyway, we're getting off subject just a little bit.
Oh yeah. Sorry.
Thanks for that. This is a great. Well, actually, we didn't, because we were talking about industry standards. What are some of the kind of industry standards we could expect for the prison system?
Ooh.
Prison safety and treatment of prisoners. I would think,
and making sure that the because one of the biggest problems in prisons today, and it's been a problem for decades, or even a whole century, is the guards, the actual prison guards, being corrupt as hell, abusing prisoners, beating prisoners, using information against them, withholding like family letters from them to get them to do things for them, bringing in drugs and making family members on the outside pay the prison guards for helping get the drugs in. Like, prison guards are really they're basically people that wanted to become cops, but they weren't able to because of their mental problems, or either their temperament, or
I don't know.
education.
In our prison system here in Georgia, I think we actually have a legal statute that all non-federal prison officers, because I think the federal prisons staffed by federal employees, but the state staffs its own prisons, and our statute states that all the prisons are managed by the county sheriffs in which the prison exists. So our prison guards are actually sheriffs and sheriff's deputies.
You're thinking of county jails. County jails,
no,
prisons and jails.
This isn't county jails. Oh wait.
Because the sheriff controls county jails, at least in Alabama. I actually know the sheriff.
This is kind of a problem, and this is one of the things I really wish the government would step in on. One of the few times, every state can set their own standards for prison guards.
Yeah,
that's
it's so different by state.
It's different.
Well, that's why you have state jails and state prison systems and federal prisons. But I can definitely see. I would like to see a federal standard for state prisons.
Yeah, like from what I've seen, it's like city jail, county jail, state prison, and federal prison. It's like the 4 major food groups of incarceration.
For the most part, yeah.
So, as far as the standards go, what should we be looking for here? Are we looking for observation time?
What do you mean by observation time?
The amount of time that the guards, like I mentioned earlier, that prison should be like military school. Like military. Yes. Okay, when a kid is not able to function in school the way that they should, they're just too out of control. You send them to military school, and they usually come out better, right? So when an adult can't adult like an adult, you send them to prison. And you can't stick them in the military and have the military straighten them out. So you stick them in prison, and that's why I believe that prison should be run very much like a nonstop boot camp. That it just doesn't end.
Yeah.
It's like you're in boot camp from the day you get there to the day you leave. You will get up at this time, you will do PT, you will eat your breakfast, you will go to your courses, you will work as a group, you will sleep with your unit, you will do, like just on and on and on. You have no time to socialize, you have no time to, you get, 30 minutes a day for this. And we're not giving you exercise in the yard because we're giving you PT.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think that would terrify people to the nth degree when it came to going to prison.
Oh yeah. And that brings up another subject. Like, okay, some people have the idea that the punishment is losing your freedom. You are losing your freedom and you're being sent to prison. That's the punishment, that is the punishment that the state or the federal government is inflicting on someone. You're losing your freedom, you can't do anything. You can't go anywhere, you lose all freedom. And so, some people say, oh no, after the sentencing, they're losing their freedom for a certain amount of time or a given amount of time. Then they should be punished while they're in prison. So they should be, worked to death. They should be on the side of the road clearing garbage for free. And they
Oh,
should,
no.
and
I
this kind of
disagree.
other stuff.
When I talk about having boot camp all day, I don't think that should be punitive. I think what it's meant to do is give them a sense of purpose, direction, and stability. And one of the things that sends people to prison, one of the things that gets people breaking laws, is they have no system of purpose and stability. They have nothing beyond their day-to-day needs.
Oh yeah, them sitting in a cell for like days on end
That's not
or
going to
years
help
on
them.
end is not going to help. Yeah, that's
No.
definitely going to make them worse. It's going to make them more depressed.
Putting them in a unit and treating them like a boot camp squad on a day-to-day basis and sending them to courses to learn a trade, learn a skill. So it gives them real-world skills that they can
gives them a sense of community too.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and also there have been prisons that have enacted, mostly low security, that have enacted things that are considered privileges, but you have to work for them. You have to be a model prisoner. You have to do get a job through the prison system. You have to actually work and learn things. But as you do that, you get more privileges. You get the ability to, I think, in Huntsville, in Texas, for example, if you're in a low security and you're near a college, you have to go with a guard. But if you basically have been being a model prisoner and you've been very good, they'll let you go to college with a guard.
Wow, that's pretty good.
Classes on campus.
That is pretty amazing.
Yeah,
there's this wonderful prison in Alabama that's in the middle of nowhere where it has no fences, it has no walls, it has very minimum. It's minimum security, and it's usually for people that are older prisoners or that don't have much time left. Or it's not for people that are in there for like 50 years. It's usually people that are in there for 2 to 10 years or 2 to 7 years, something like that. And it's like a huge farm. You work on the farm. You take care of cattle. You take care of horses, and it's a huge floodplain area. So you help fill sandbags, for like the municipal buildings around the area, and it's just this wide open, like beautiful area, and you can walk in and out as you please. The prisoners have total freedom. So you're just not allowed to leave, of course.
Well, I think they have to earn that though. Like you can't just. You can't.
They earn it in other prisons, and they're transferred there when they behave.
You can't just. I think that's the thing. Like I kind of am in the middle because I don't want prisons to be these like super strict, essentially punishment factories where people are just
you don't want to go back to 1919 when they used to treat them and put them in like iron shackles and whip them and stuff.
Yeah, but I also don't want to do the exact opposite, which is where you go to prison and it's like sleepaway camp.
Yeah,
it's like sleepaway camp.
Like Martha Stewart prison.
Yeah, like if you want privileges, you need to earn them. That's how I feel. And you need to be structured as well, because again, you're there because you could not function in society. So I do kind of agree with the military thing too. It's like they need to be structured, but if they behave in that structure, then they get more privileges and a little bit more freedom.
I should have done a little bit of research before we started, but there are some Scandinavian prison systems that have been really soft and like given the prisoners a lot of freedom and stuff, and it has worked. And there's some of them that don't work, and I'm not sure the correlation between why some of them work when they are doing this very very like touchy-feely, like hippie commune, like, oh, love them all and teach them things and give them like a TV and an Xbox in their room, and they'll succeed. And in some other countries that do the exact same thing in that region, it fails and it doesn't work as well.
I'm assuming it's because they're giving that to all prisoners regardless of what they did or not, or whether they want to improve their standing. Because again, there are some people that are just too far gone. So it doesn't matter. They'll never earn the privileges. They'll never do that. They'll just sit there and they'll be violent. And those are the people who cannot be rehabilitated.
Oh, yeah.
And I feel like when that fails, it's because they're not looking at each person as an individual. They're saying, we need to treat everyone equally. And I'm like, no, you don't do that in prison. They lost the chance to be looked at equally when they decided to do what they did.
And there's a gigantic gang problem in the U.S. prison system. So that's another thing that like European prisons have that gang problem, but not to the horrible, it's like very, very, very integrated in the U.S. prison system, the gang culture.
That is an interesting point, and it kind of pokes a big hole in my idea about squad training and stuff like that.
That would be the biggest hurdle to get over.
What you definitely have to do is break up the groups from time to time and rearrange them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think you probably do like 3-month training periods for like, at this month, you guys are training, say, bricklaying, and you guys over here are training this, and so forth and so on. And you just go through the different learning stations as you go through the prison. And, if you qualify for the skill, then you can go on to the advanced class. Otherwise, you get broken up and thrown into, another group. That way people have the chance to maybe find something that fits them better while they're being, shuffled around. And once they find that real calling, then they can actually get into a group that actually has a real passion that they have.
And a lot of that stems from gangs in prison stem from two things. It stems from just the human natural, ability to want to form a group.
Yeah, for protection. Yeah.
But also it stems from just like the guys who run the gangs in prison. They're very good at finding these people who are lost and they don't really know what they're going to do when they get out. So they kind of give them an alternative, but at the same time, they're just going to make them come back in prison because they're not giving them any helpful tips.
Yeah. They're basically institutionalizing them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a huge problem in the prison system. That's the reason for reform more than anything is the institutionalization and the recidivism rate.
Yeah, the revolving door that never ends.
Yeah, once you're in, you're stuck.
Yeah, it's just really, it's kind of shitty. And then as far as recidivism goes, I think that, well, not recidivism, but I've talked to a few people about prisons before, and there's a lot of people who just feel like once you've committed a crime, you don't deserve any privileges. They feel like you should just be punished. You don't necessarily deserve to be rehabilitated and brought back to society. And I don't know where that attitude came from, but that's just,
I think it comes
terrible.
from vindictive people who aren't happy with their lives and want to there was this something called the Stanford Prison Experiment.
Oh, yes.
And if you haven't heard of this,
no, I have.
Yeah,
that documentary is so crazy.
It's insane, and the guy who ran it is actually in prison now. And
yeah, he was very unscientific and very immoral during.
Well, I think what happened is he got so
experiment.
interested in it that
he should have said, when things got really crazy. So like for the first few days it was fine. When things got really crazy, he should have stepped in and stopped the experiment.
Well, he actually stepped in and started telling the guards what to do and stuff, which he was not supposed to do. He was supposed to keep himself totally separate and let them do what they would do naturally. But he totally destroyed the scientific, experimenter, stepping in when you shouldn't have.
We study those experiments to go over like research ethics, even though that's not the type of research we do. But you got to, because that's a really big ethical case, because it's like he did a bunch of stuff that you're not supposed to do. He was influencing his results, first of all, and then at the same time, he was hurting people. And even though psychology research, you can kind of get away with making people feel fear or whatever, you're not supposed to mentally traumatize people. There is definitely a line.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you get to stay with your mom.
So,
And wasn't the main goal to like figure out why the Nazis did what they did, kind of thing?
I don't remember what his goal was, to be honest. I thought his goal was, because it's been a while since I've read up on the study.
I don't think it's really relevant what the goal was. The method
Yeah.
was so
The method was
flawed,
really, unethical.
He was trying to prove something like people in power will always abuse their power, which isn't true, especially when you're telling people to abuse their power. But
It's like the old saying, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Well,
yeah.
that's why I think that you have this certain segment within society, this highly aggressive, highly vindictive, highly unhappy group of people that will, if given the opportunity, simply just abuse people if given
And take it out on everyone they come across. Yeah.
When I see people, when I hear them talking about an ex-con and saying, they committed a crime, yeah, they did their time, but I'm never ever going to, they don't deserve any rights and all that, like what you're saying, Tina. I think what it really boils down to is they're just a hateful person that wants to hurt other people, and they found a ready excuse for this person as a target.
I'd like to add a little nuance to that discussion, because this is kind of relating to the question of punitive versus reformative.
Mm-hmm.
I once read an article by C.S. Lewis that said that ultimately, to quote him, "I do not know whether a murderer is more likely to repent and make good on the gallows a few weeks after his trial, or in the prison infirmary 30 years later. I do not know whether the fear of death is an indispensable deterrent. I need not, for the purpose of this article, decide whether it is morally permissible deterrent. Those are questions I propose to leave untouched." And he goes into the idea that reformation can essentially be a dehumanization of one's ability to choose what he does. And the punitive aspect, the way he views it, the way he viewed it in this article that he wrote, was more, he viewed it as an acknowledgement of the fact that you are able, as a thinking, intelligent human being, to make your own decisions. And you have to face the consequences regardless.
Yeah.
So it wasn't so much lazy punitive sociopathy, to put it like my crew does, but more a question of, is it right to reform a criminal as opposed to assume that no one can ever know better?
Well, I don't know. I think we kind of touched on that when we discussed the people that can't be reformed, because I agree there's certainly people that can't be reformed, but I believe that our prison population is just flooded with a huge number of people who can and who can be taught skills and put to good use and become good citizens, and they're really imprisoned because we have more laws than we even realize we have.
And there's a huge number that are innocent.
Yeah.
I was more trying to elaborate that there's another way to think of it with regards to a punitive measure.
I do agree.
This is my belief.
No, I see what he's saying there to some degree.
And I'll link this, by the way.
But my argument
I want to see that.
My argument against him would be that's only really relevant if the penalty for all crimes is well known by all citizens. Because
Yeah.
if the penalty for all crimes is well known by all citizens, then yes, you committed the crime knowingly, and you will face the penalty that you knew before you even began to commit the crime. So that kind of removes the old judge's argument of ignorance is no excuse. Well, I'm sorry, yes, it is, and then you have to ask yourself, when is ignorance genuine?
Yeah, it's like the only reason that how can you know every single law that's in the books? There are so many. Like, you would have to be a law student or a professor to know
No, even
every
they don't.
single law
Even
that
they
you
don't.
could absolutely break. Even
Hold
they
on,
don't. Yeah, that's right.
That's why you pay them by the hour, because they go and
Exactly.
research the law.
That's especially true.
That's
with
why my
English law.
Yeah. That's why my law class, our tests, every test we had was open book, because our professor was like, yeah, there's no fucking way. If I ask you to find this one specific law, I would rather you know where to look it up than
Yes.
memorize it, because you're never going to be able to do it.
And that's a good way to teach. That makes sense.
So.
But
it makes sense because the guy teaching the class was a DA. He was doing this on his nights. So I was just like, that makes sense. He knows.
Yeah.
But that was especially true in England, and still is, because they still refer back to laws over 500 years old.
Oh no! Oh my God!
Oh my God!
Could you imagine?
Yeah.
Oh, there's a few laws in my state that are just, they're not enforceable, but they'll never remove them from the book because the process of removing them is a pain in the ass.
Like weird laws, like strange. Like, why was that? Like, was that a problem back then? In 1806, was that a problem?
My favorite are the tangents, the ones that I find that I understand why they're there, but at the same time, I'm like, why is this so specific? Like, in the state I'm from, they have a law that specifically says you can't operate a roller coaster while drunk, while next to the law about operating motor vehicles. And I'm sitting there going, why are we so specific about this one thing?
That must have happened a lot around that time, I guess.
Well,
they had to make a specific law.
There's also a question to be asked on that, because there are so many specific laws. Let's say you get pulled over for speeding, and the officer says he smells alcohol in your breath and says that you've been swerving. He gets you out, does the test, and tells you you're being arrested. He brings you back to the squad car, puts you in the back, you're in handcuffs, you're sitting back there. I'm not saying whether you're guilty of anything or not. That's not the focus of this argument, because at the end of the day, when you get out of jail, you're handed 17 tickets.
Yeah.
And you're like, what in the living fuck? And yeah, they've charged you with every little crime that they possibly could. And the reason that they do that is because if they're just going to get you for, say, a DUI, you're facing a year in jail or whatever, the equivalent, and so forth and so on. But if they can levy 17 different charges against you, they can
you ran a stop sign, reckless driving.
Yeah, we've got 25 years worth of prison time here for you, or you can cop a plea and take 3 years probation for the one we really want to get you on, the only one we have any actual evidence for.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that if you fight it, they'll drop most of the charges except for the ones that actually apply to you.
Yeah, but all the little details, like, oh, your tread on your tires was like 1/16 of an inch too low on the left rear tire.
Like weird little tiny things like that, yeah.
And they'll nail you with everything that they have evidence for. That's what
they'll go over your vehicle with a fine-tooth comb and say it's an unsafe vehicle if it has like a spark plug loose or something.
It's a tool, and I understand kind of why they do it, and it's kind of like, well, that's a little ingenious because you're kind of forcing people so you don't have to go to trial. But at the same time, it's so steedy and against what our justice system stands for, theoretically.
Yeah, it's against the moral fabric of our nation. It's
most
really
people see it as a money-making machine.
Yeah, and it is, because essentially the one they want you to cop the plea to is the one that they can issue the biggest fine against.
Yes.
And the sad part is the money doesn't even go back into the police station. It mostly goes into like 3 people's hands.
Yeah, and then the mayor gets to run on a re-election of, hey, I was tough on crime. Look what all my prosecutors and my police did. They arrested twice as many people this year as they did last year, and issued 3 times as many citations. And the people go, "Oh yay, we'll vote for you again." Do you realize
Yeah.
what that means for you as a citizen? You dumb shit. Why are
I've
you
got some
voting for this
scary
person?
stories about what my sheriff has done in his county jails and stuff.
Yeah.
Like, did you know that a lot of sheriffs, especially in the South, but this is supposedly, like, no, not supposedly, actually, it's been in the news like several times in the past 5 years. Sheriffs will skim the money off the top of, when they're supposed to go out, and the sheriff and his secretary are supposed to procure food for the county jail prisoners. They will skim money off the top every month. Like, if they have, let's say, they get $5,000 to $7,000 per month to feed the prisoners, they will only spend $3,000 to $4,000 to
Yeah, it's called
$5,000.
embezzlement, and
Yeah,
it's
that
rampant
happens
throughout.
everywhere. Yes.
It's rampant throughout all government bureaucracies.
And,
Oh,
and
yeah.
that's what I mean when I say like 3 people get the money. It doesn't even go back into the police stations.
Yeah.
At least if it went back into the police stations
There are
and
maggots in the
improved
food.
things, I could be like, yeah, okay, at least the money's going to good use, even though this is morally wrong. But no, it's going to like 3 people.
Yeah, in their pockets.
Generally speaking, it dumps right into the county coffers.
Yeah.
But that's a different subject for a different. And
Yeah.
maybe we'll have a brain trust on that at some point.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Speaking of which, this is the Brain Trust. We're here on the Academy. We haven't got a regular set time. This is the pilot program. If you like it, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, tell us you like it, and we'll keep it going. Anyway, back to prison reform. I'm the ad monkey, by the way.
So what's the worst? What is the worst aspect of prison? That you, like, if you were in prison, what would be the worst aspect that you would think, oh, this needs to change?
The worst aspect for me doesn't need to change, but the worst aspect for me is lack of privacy. But I feel like when you go to prison, you give that up because you need to. But I think the worst thing for me as a woman is the fact that I'm not trying to single out men because it's not just a men problem. Yeah. There are a lot. So when they first came up with the idea of prisons, and this is something that we actually talked about in a lot of my classes that I took about prison, they developed the prison system mostly for the needs of men. And this is a true thing because it is a problem. I'm not just trying to pull the sex card. It's actually a real thing.
Yeah, it sounds like a huge problem.
Yeah, and the thing about it is that men and women have very different needs psychologically. And so there's a lot of problems with women's prisons not being able to address certain things. And so that's just an issue I have, and I would probably have as a woman in prison.
Oh, yeah.
Because, and I'm not saying that men do not have attachment to their children. They do. But obviously women have a much more different bond with their kids. And when they're in prison and they're not able to have certain visits where they're able to like touch their kids and see their kids, it actually does destroy both the kids and the women mentally, more so than men, strangely enough.
Well, I also think by kicking men out of the family with the prison issue, you're kind of screwing up the next generation as well. I mean, one of the biggest things you find in prison inmates is that they come from single mother families. So, on both, I'm definitely hearing what you're saying, and you're talking about deep psychological damage. But yeah, either family. So part of the prison reform definitely needs to incorporate reconnection to family.
So, Dolphin, from what you've heard and what you've seen, and if you were a prisoner, what do you think should be reformed first? Like, what is the number one thing you think personally, from your point of view, should be reformed first?
I believe that the guards need to be reformed first. And the reason I believe that is because
that is a big problem.
There's a certain when you're put into prison, they give you a personality evaluation, they check your education levels, and a lot of other things. They give you a lot of testing because they don't want to they don't want to put really dangerous people next to each other.
Oh yeah.
And so they also don't want people from different gangs getting stuck in the same pods. It causes problems, so forth and so on. So they have, different wards, different wings, different pods. And there's enough safety in that system, but it's not secure because when you have guards that are bringing drugs into the prison, you have a really unpredictable situation.
Oh yeah.
You have people that are in prison. Okay, they're in prison. A lot of them are not there for good reasons. None of them are there for good reasons. But there's some there that you give them drugs and you got a much more dangerous situation. So everything can be really calm and quiet. And I'm thinking if I'm in prison, the thing I'm most stressed out about is waiting for the guy to freak out.
Mm.
It's not when he freaks out, because once that starts, I can probably figure out what I'm going to do and
So
do
it's
it.
like horribly mentally ill, violent people, like being in the cell with someone that, like, let's
Yeah.
say you were in jail for like a couple ounces of weed, and all of a sudden you're being paired with someone in a cell that has like beaten
Yeah.
3 people's heads into a fucking concrete pillar or
I
something.
think the anxiety of sitting next to this guy for 8 hours watching Walker Texas Ranger over and over again is probably going to be worse to deal with than when he actually flips and I like jump over a chair and just barely escape his wrath or something, like that.
Yeah.
Like, I think I can handle the situation once it occurs. It's the anxiety building up to it that bothers me. And so
Oh yeah.
I think so. One of the major issues is guards bringing in drugs and guards brutalizing prisoners and pushing them to that edge.
What would be the solution to keep guards, actually honest and keep guards from? Do you think they should rotate them from prison to prison
Well,
weekly or like
beyond,
monthly?
no, I think weekly rotating through the prison, like through different wards.
Yeah, where they
Um,
don't have a connection and get corrupted by a certain
exactly.
prisoner so quickly. Yeah.
Exactly. So, and then on top of that, you have like say quarterly rotations through the prison system. But more than that, I think they should go into boot camp training. I think that prisons should primarily hire former military,
Yeah.
and that I believe that they should operate under a military code of honor. And I believe that they should treat the prison like these are my students and I am their commander, and I need to take care of them as much as I need to teach, direct, and guide
Yeah.
them. And I think if you put every prison guard in that mindset, then you have a completely different system.
Oh yeah. Because if prison guards now are taught like, oh, you work in a big box, a big metal barred box with the
It's
enemy.
you and them. It's us against them. Yeah.
Exactly, and that
I think
mentality needs to change.
I think the dynamic of the prison society needs to change entirely.
We have Hagbard in the chat. He notes that his best friends were a murderer and a man that beat someone with a golf club.
Well, does he want to come in and have a chat with us?
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Send him a link.
I've already sent him a link.
All right, excellent.
Okay. If it works for him,
we shall see. Anyway,
but what he's saying, former military MPs and reformed platoon leaders, and dump female support staff in male prisons.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. But I also think that there should be more guys with families should once they qualify and they earn those privileges, like Tina was talking about earlier, they should have more time with their families and more private free time. There should be no guy going no touching when you try to hug your kids.
Oh yeah,
that should not be
terrifying.
there. That guy should not be there. That's terrible for the kids. There should be a little yard, a little playground, a section, like it's a family section in the prison. You go over there. It's maybe not the best,
Well, I can go ahead and say this since you mentioned that. My father, 2.5 or 3 years ago, was released from prison for on a 3-year sentence for just marijuana. He had 40 to 50 pounds of marijuana in the closet. We didn't know about it. He was holding it for his buddy, who's like an old agent. My dad is 60-something now.
I had a feeling that was a specific reference.
Yes. And basically they're like a group of like 20 or 30 of their friends. They're all like 55 or older. They're all like old aging hippies, and get this pot from Mexico, and then they like split it among themselves, and they all make like a $1,500 profit on all of it by giving it to each other and selling it to each other. And so one night, my dad sold it to like one of his friends or something, and they got caught down the road. So for like a couple weeks, apparently without our knowledge, the police were monitoring the house and stuff, and the cops gave this fucking asshole like $20 or $30 to come buy an ounce from us. You know, not us, but my father. And he came to the house. He bought it. He had a wire on. He had all this stuff. And so the guy left. And a week later, they busted in the house. I was in my bedroom. I was playing a video game or doing something. They busted into the house. They acted like we had like, you know, military hardware or something in there. They busted in. They freaked out. They started screaming. They made us go all in the living room and started making horrible asshole comments like, oh, like we were paying for everything in the house with just marijuana money or something. Like my dad is a machinist who makes $40 an hour. He was just doing this, you know, because he did it when he was in his 20s, and it made him feel alive still, basically. It made him feel like he was young still, just by doing this. So my dad makes plenty of money. So she's like, oh, the little dyke female officer's like, oh, you got a big screen TV, huh? That's nice. We don't have one of those. Oh, I see you have a microwave that's new. We don't have one of those. And she just kept pointing at shit in our fucking living room and saying shit like that.
Well, don't
And
worry. After the asset forfeiture law helps you, you'll have it.
oh yeah, exactly. They took. I had the first shotgun I ever bought, a 410 shotgun. I bought when I was 16 with my father at a gun show. They took that. They took my great grandfather's stagecoach shotgun. That's a split. You know, it splits. You know, it's like a break. You know, a barrel break shotgun. Like it's from like 1880. They took that. They took my dad in our safe. My grandparents' jewelry. They took $15,000 in cash. They took my mom and dad have both been in car accidents and had horrible back surgery and stuff. My dad's had heart attacks twice. So they took his heart medicine, and they took my mom's pain pills for her back, and basically said, oh, you got so many drugs here. Oh my God. You know, thinking it was like really narcotic kind of stuff. And freaked out, and then they scared the hell out. And I had marijuana in my bedroom because I was like 17 or 16 at the time. So I had like, you know, a quarter of an ounce of pot in my bedroom. They found it and they're like, oh, we found this back here, but we're just going to take your dad. And make sure you don't do anything from now on, or we're going to come back and get you. We have 3 years to come back and get you. And started threatening me with, you know, arrest if I fucked up in the next 3 years. Even though, yeah, they should have taken me to jail because I was expecting to go to jail that night. It was so scary. And for the next 3 years, my dad, and the lawyer's a whole different thing. The lawyer, we paid like $15,000-$20,000 for the guy to represent my father. And it was crazy because after my dad went to jail, the guy never returned our phone calls or anything. He was like, oh, well, that's it. They wanted to send my dad to jail for 48 pounds of marijuana for 20 or 30 years. For just marijuana that he wasn't selling to any kids or anything. It was just for like him and old people. For 20 years. But then, like, you know, they were trying to scare him with that and stuff. Like, oh, well, if you take a plea deal, it'll be 5 years. And then the lawyer got it down to 3 years. And then we had an appeal and everything, but the lawyer, after my dad went to jail, the lawyer just kept the money, didn't try to do an appeal or anything like that, and wouldn't return phone calls. And then he went to like a I forgot what the prison was called, but it was like a minimum security place, and it looked like more of a nursing home than it did look like a prison. And so that's basically my little story.
Oh,
that really doesn't have a point.
So, what's your biggest issue with prison reform? What's your biggest problem with prisons?
My biggest issue is there's like 3 or 4 things. Like, one, the prison guards. 2, how they treat families when you go to prison. Did you know that even if you have never been arrested, I've never been arrested in my life. I have never been in the system in my life. And neither has my younger brother, my cousins, or anybody. But when we would go visit my father, you know what they do when you go and visit someone in Alabama in a prison?
Pat you down?
They pat you down and they fingerprint you and put your fingerprint in a database. So even though I'd never been fingerprinted before, I've never committed a crime, they patted me down, they took my DNA, and they put your fingerprint in a database. For some reason, they have to take your hair.
That's a DNA database.
Yeah. Oh, no, not hair. No, not hair. They did the swab thing. They did the hair the next time we went, but the first time we went, they did the swab thing. Like, oh, we need a swab thing to make sure that you're not some criminal. They made up an excuse, But, I had no choice at that point because I was with my mom, and I was like, we need to go see your dad. She was guilt-tripping me, as moms always do. We need to go see your father, he's missing you guys. And after my dad got out, he was never the same.
What was he like when he got out?
He acted like because he had already had 2 heart attacks before he went to prison. And he acted like, he was just loopy, and he just, every time he heard like weird, like every time he heard like noises or something like that, he would like jump, and like he was terrified of everything. And
So like a PTSD type situation.
Exactly, like PTSD. And he said all the prisoners were like young guys that respected him and stuff because he was an old timer and stuff. My dad had spent time in jail in the 1980s, because, well, he was, selling cocaine and stuff back then, But from the 1980s all the way till now, he didn't do anything. He was like a machinist all the time. But, in the 80s, everybody was doing the shit, and he made like so much money back then. He had a gigantic fro that was the size of a goddamn beach ball. You should see a picture of it. It's hilarious. And so he had been to prison before, and Mom said, my mom married him like 2 or 3 years after he got out of prison. The first time in the mid-80s. And she said he was fucked up after that too. And then I see what she means after he got out recently, because he was just not the same person that went in. And he was like, and then just 2 or 3 months ago, he had a stroke because they didn't give him his blood thinners when they were supposed to. They gave him the wrong medicine when he was in prison, even though he was supposed to be on blood thinners and like anticoagulants stuff because of his heart attack. And in prison, he has horrible back problems. He was on like, a few muscle relaxers and painkillers for his back and his leg because he's had surgery on his, lower back and stuff, like slip discs and stuff. And in prison, they can't give you painkillers because you'll try to sell them or something like that. Oh, we don't want you to be, happy in prison. You have to be in pain all the time. If you're someone that's in a wheelchair that's had their leg amputated, fuck that. If you're in horrible pain, you have to be and you have to take medicine on the outside for your pain. You can't take it on the inside because that would mean you're somewhat, not suffering. You have to suffer while you're in prison, is the kind of mentality they have. You have to suffer while you're in here, but the actual punishment is losing your freedom. Why do they have to make you suffer, unduly?
I think it goes back to the vindictive nature, and that's where I come back to military MPs, former commanders, former military, and
make it more regimented.
Make it more regimented, more community based. I think Tina pointed out the offer of privileges and benefits for completion of good behavior and good service.
Yes, that's a great idea.
You get more family time. I think the prisons should be focused more on reconnecting families and trying to make the prisoners understand what they're going to be working for when they get out.
Oh yeah. 3 times during a visit with him, they would like have a noise, and then all the prisoners would stand up and they would do a head count. 3 times during one visit, and the visits were only like 2 hours long. You'd get frisked, you'd get fingerprinted, they'd take your DNA, you'd go through, they'd make you strip. Like old women that were grandmothers visiting their grandsons.
Like TSA style.
Worse than that. I mean, worse than that. They didn't have rubber glove up your ass or anything, but they would take your shoes off, take your socks off, take everything off, but like we went there probably about 10 times or 20 times to see him, because it was only like once a month you could see them. You know, you couldn't see them once a week. It's like once a month we got to see him for 3 years.
Yeah, and
And
I think to
it's
some
really
degree,
horrible.
I think to some degree that requirement is necessary, and like I said,
Oh yeah, their
if you
facilities can't handle visits like all the time. I understand that, you know.
if your
Yeah.
facility is housing, let's say, some really bad dudes, then
Well, he is in minimum security, for example.
see, but minimum security shouldn't have that need. And
Yeah.
that's kind of my issue is these guys should be training to do things that they can use when they get back out.
Oh yeah, my
They
dad got
should,
his GED while he was in there. He taught Spanish people English while he was in there. Yeah, my dad like taught classes while he was in there and everything.
well,
Which
and that's another
and
thing
they
is
didn't
that
even take his time down for it. I mean,
the
he just did it, you know, to have something to do.
the prisons and the county jails could learn a thing from this. You put them on agricultural projects and you plot out the land because there's always plenty of land on a prison.
Yeah, that's what he did when you know, I told you about that place earlier where you move
Yeah.
from like a normal prison to like a farm kind of prison. That's why I was talking about it, because that's where he moved, and that's where we picked him up when he was released. And this place is like beautiful. It's like wide open spaces,
Yeah,
and
it should, and
yeah.
that's where prison. Well, I don't think wide open space is necessary, but um, what I'm actually thinking about, is like teaching people how to survive on the outside, and it
Oh
also
yeah.
helps prison with sustainability. I mean, especially if we go back to the concept of privatized prisons. If you got a private prison, rather than lobbying for stricter laws and longer terms and the right to say give 2 for 1 and still get paid for 2, um, you could probably make a pretty decent profit cutting your food bill by, turning the land into landscaping and putting the men on vegetable growth
Oh yeah,
and
a lot of these
some.
prisons grow half of what the prisoners eat.
Yeah, some level of say chicken raising or something like that, and so forth and so on, those kinds of things.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think that they should be subsidizing their the resources with the resources that they have, and what you have in a prison more than anything is a mass of labor
Yeah.
and
And gardening and, you know,
people who need to
cultivating your
be
own food
back.
is a good thing.
Yeah. But yeah, I think if you spend, say you get a 5-year sentence and you're on a path, you're one of those guys that you haven't actually done anything bad yet, but you've tied
Yeah.
up with some bad people outside, and you're on that path that when you get out of here, your life is going to be crime from here on out. And you go into a prison system, say for 5 years, and it's like boot camp every day for 5 years. But in that 5 years, you learn how to do automotive service, and you learn how to grow your own food, and you learn some carpentry, and you learn some electrical engineering, and you learn bricklaying, and you learn concrete forming. You get out, and these guys are like, "Hey, man, you want to get back into this?" It'd be like, "No, man, I'm on a schedule for some reason. I can't help but wake up at 5 a.m. every fucking morning, make my own breakfast, do some PT, and get to work.
Hmm.
This is like
And as
my
it is
life now."
now, they make it, you know, the prison system make it as hard as possible for you to actually make it in society, because they want you to, like, oh,
They
you wake
want
up
you
at this
back,
time.
I think.
Oh yeah, we want you to come over here. We want you to, like, you have to have a
It's the
probation
Hotel
officer. You check in with
California,
them.
man.
You do this, you do that. You know, they make your schedule so hectic, and you have to find and work at a job in this hectic schedule and this hectic, uh, these terms they set on you. It makes it almost impossible for you to succeed.
That's
It's
why.
almost impossible.
You, and you're putting everybody out there on their own in a prison system. You're talking
Yeah,
about people who don't operate well on their own already. It's been
yeah,
proven, or else it wouldn't be there. And so you need to put them in a group. You need to, whenever one of them screws up, the whole group needs to be punished. And then, and the punishment doesn't need to be, you're all beaten with sticks. No,
it's like you don't get dessert for a week
you
or
don't get
something.
dessert. Yeah, don't get dessert, and you get 5 more minutes of PT every day for the next
Yeah,
week. And it's all because this idiot, did this.
But you do got to remember, though, in prisons, though, there are people of different ages. It's not just young kids that can do PT. There are, like, like my father, there are people that are 50, 55 or older that have heart problems that can't do this kind of stuff.
That's why you need better organization skills.
Yeah.
You really do. And I get,
there needs to be, like, everything separate. Like, there are, like, these old-timer dudes. And
you got a guy that can't do PT, well, then you get him walking for the time in the PT and clapping his hands, moving around, whatever, if he can move. If he's not in a wheelchair, you got a lot of guys that are obese and you can't PT them because it is actually a medical danger.
Yeah, my dad's a machinist. I mean, he's really good. They should just get him to machine stuff for the prison.
Well, no, they'd want to expand on his skill set, that should be the concept, is let's expand your skill set. Let's give you a lot of different options so that when you get out of here, you can come out and be like, hey, man, I got, I got 6 months woodworking. I got 6 months automotive repair. I got 6 months. In fact, the past 6 years, I've been on straight study courses for these subjects. So boom.
Luckily, my father, like, owned a part of the business that he left before he was arrested, before he went to prison. So when he got back, he went right back into the the machinist job he was in beforehand. So he didn't have to search for a job or anything. It was waiting for him. Like, his boss was like, yeah, don't worry. We understand that, this is stupid. You were arrested for a stupid reason. You didn't hurt anybody. They just came in, this is legal in other states. I don't know why it's not legal here yet, but, Alabama's fucked up. So, when you get out, you'll have a job here and we'll even give you a $10 an hour raise.
Well, anyway,
it's different for everybody.
Have we got, Egg, are you still here?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Anything to add to the conversation?
Yeah, dude.
I kind of think it's all been said, really.
Excellent. Well, I've run out of ideas to throw out there. I'm getting a little sleepy.
Yeah, we've kind of run around a few issues.
Yeah, and Hagbard just had come home when I had sent the link. So
fair enough. But if you guys enjoyed the show, go ahead and give us a thumbs up. Tell us that you liked us. Make us feel good about it, and hopefully we'll be able to do some more Brain Trust episodes in the future.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. By the way, you can follow the Academy on Twitter. You can follow myself, Dolphin Radio, on Gab and Minds, as well as that decaying, dying platform known as Twitter. And also here on this dying platform known as YouTube. And
we're all dying.
Yeah, we're coming to join Kyle the Dead. Tell us where we can find you, Kyle.
At Mr. Dead Kyle, capital M, capital D, capital K on Twitter, and you can check me out on YouTube at Kyle the Dead.
Excellent. And Tina, are you back? Can we hear you?
Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you. Yes.
Oh, okay. Right at the end, of course. Yeah, I don't know what happened. I actually had to switch to my phone. My computer is being an ass.
You had so much
content. I know. Anyway, you can find me right now. I'm mostly just shitposting on Twitter because if for people who don't know, I'm a full-time PhD student and I'm in my last year. So I did make a few YouTube videos, but I just don't have the time.
Oh yeah.
I might come back to it one day. I'm hoping to, but right now I just shitpost on Twitter and I talk to these guys a lot. So
yeah.
But you can find me at actually Tina on Twitter, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you for checking out. Oh yeah.
And I forgot. I co-host with Chairview.
On what? Oh, on
Chairview's channel. Yeah.
Oh,
at Chairview.
All right. Well, anyway, thank you for
just
checking us.
One last message to Hagbard. We will for sure let you know next time we have one of these.
Yes. Hopefully we can make it a weekly thing. I'd love for you guys to come up with subjects that we can all brainstorm, talk about solutions to. And and we can come back here and do it more often.
Sounds fun.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's been great.
I don't mind coming on. These are easy for
Yeah,
me if I have time.
These are
Mhm.
discussions. You can just freeform
Yeah, like
talks.
I know that Tim has been asking me to like come on and like discuss things, which is fine. But a lot of times I have to prep for it. But when it's just like general discussions like this, I'm fine with it because I don't have to prep.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's more fun.
the focus of this is not to debate. The focus of this is to solve, or at least brainstorm solutions.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, anyway, I hope you guys all enjoyed it, and I hope to see you again. Thank you for joining us at the Academy. Like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you later. Peace.
Bye.
Peace.
Bye.
Oh yeah.